Good morning. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat na imbag na nagsapa kanya kayo amin. In this video, I will be discussing the overview on correctional administration. Correctional administration is one of the areas in the criminology's licensure examination. And though this is only 10% in the board exam, this area should be taken seriously because every subject and every area in the criminology's licensure examination is equally important. By the way, I am Mr. John Vincent S. Carmel, your teacher for today. So what is correction? If you have upcoming examinations or upcoming quizzes and you did not prepare for your exam or quiz and cheated during the examination, then we can say na mali yun. However, if you prepared for your exam, if you exerted a lot of efforts, okay, you read your notes, you studied your lessons, and did not cheat during the examination, then we can say na correction. Okay? So that is the meaning of correction. Joke lang po. Okay, let's proceed with the real definition of correction. So what is correction? Correction may be understood as a pillar in the criminal justice system and as a process. It is a pillar of criminal justice system that is charged with the custody, supervision, and rehabilitation of convicted offenders. And take note, when we say criminal justice system, it is actually a machinery or a tool of our government or our society uses in the prevention and in the control of crimes. And in the Philippines, okay, we have 5 pillars of criminal justice system. And these are law enforcement, the prosecution, the court, the correction, and the community. As you can see in the presentation, okay, correction is the 4th pillar of the criminal justice system and is also regarded as the weakest pillar, okay, of our criminal justice system because of their failure to reform and to rehabilitate the offenders. And also with the presence of cases of recidivism, quasi-recidivism, and also habitual delinquency. Okay. Also, correction may be understood as a process. It is a process, okay, of reorientation the criminal offenders to prevent him or her from repeating his wrongful actions or delinquent acts without imposing any punitive actions, but rather what are being applied or introduced, okay, are the individual measures of reformation or rehabilitation. So that if the offender will be going back to the community, he will become a productive and law-abiding citizen. Okay? A lot of students are claiming or are confused, okay, as to the definition of correction and penology. Others are claiming that they are the same, okay, but actually they are not. As discussed earlier, correction is one of the pillars of our criminal justice system, okay, whereas penology, as discussed in our previous video, is one of the principal divisions of criminology, and it focuses on the study of punishment for crime or of criminal offenders. Penology also includes the study on the prevention and control of crimes through the imposition or through the punishment of criminal offenders. Be noted further that the word penology came from the word pena, which means pain or suffering. Okay? we also have important theories in correction. Okay, we have the classical, the neoclassical, the positivist, and eclectic theory. When we say classical theory, the main concept of this theory is that they believe that a person is a free-willed individual who knows what is right and what is wrong. That is why it is part of necessary that if this person committed a wrongful violation, a wrongful act, then he or she should be held liable or should be liable for the consequences of his or her acts. Okay? And also, this theory is also known as the free will theory. Okay? Next is neoclassical theory. Neoclassical theory also believes that a person has free will. But in neoclassical, okay, it gives modifications, okay, because they believe that a person, okay, there are factors, there are circumstances, okay, which might affect a person in exercising his free will entirely and completely. That there are these factors, okay, like pathology, insanity, and incompetence that make a person, okay, incapable of exercising his or her free will entirely. That is why instead of punishing them, okay, they should be exempt from the crime that they commit, or their penalties should be mitigated. That is why this theory, okay, proposed the exempting and mitigating circumstances. Okay? Also, we have the positivist theory. Positivist theory rejected the concept of free will and believes that a person, okay, there are reasons why a person committed a crime. There are factors, okay, that pushed a person to commit a crime. So instead of punishing them, they should be treated like patients in the hospital who needs special care, attention, okay, rather than imposing punishment to them. Lastly, we have the eclectic theory. Eclectic theory is the combination of beneficial aspects of classical, neoclassical, and the positivist theory. By the way, positivist theory is also known as Italian theory because all of the advocates of this theory or school of thought are all Italians. Okay? And they are Cesar Lombroso, who is regarded as the father of modern criminology, Rafael Garofalo, and Enrico Ferri. What are the correction approaches in the Philippines? So there are two correction approaches in our country, which include institutional correction and non-institutional correction. When we say institutional correction, it deals with the rehabilitation or reformation of an offender inside the prison or in jail. Okay? Also, it deals with jails or prisons where a convict is going to serve his sentence. Non-institutional correction, on the other hand, deals with the rehabilitation or reformation of offenders that takes place in the community. That is why it is also known as or called as community-based correction because the way of rehabilitation or the rehabilitation or reformation happens or takes place in the free community. So by means of non-institutional correction programs, okay, the jails or prisons will be decongested. Examples of community-based treatment programs are probation, parole, and pardon. Okay. Next is the institutional correction. We will be emphasizing the institutional correction, okay, by giving the difference between the jail and prison. So again, jails and prisons are two different terms. They should not be used, okay, interchangeably. So what are the differences between the two? Jail is an institution for the confinement of persons who are awaiting final disposition of their criminal cases, and also for the service of those convicted and punished with shorter sentence, usually up to 3 years. From this definition, we can say that there are persons, or there are four categories of inmates, okay, who are being confined in jails. Number one are those who are undergoing and awaiting investigation. Number two are those undergoing or awaiting trial. Third is those who are awaiting for final judgment. And lastly are persons who are convicted and punished to serve a shorter sentence, usually up to 3 years. But in prison, it is actually an institution for the imprisonment of persons convicted by a final judgment, and the penalty is more than 3 years. Let's go back to jail before we tackle the example of prison. One of the examples of jail is lock-up jail. For the information of everyone, lock-up jail is a jail that is common in every police station. It is actually a security facility wherein the persons are temporarily detained, especially persons who are under investigation and awaiting for preliminary hearing. Whereas in prison, one of the examples of prison is the New Bilibid prison. It is actually the center facility for correcting individuals or houses prisoners in the Philippines. So, New Bilibid prison is situated in Muntinlupa in the Philippines and has two satellites, to wit the Camp Sampaguita, which houses the medium security prisoners, and also it is where the reception and diagnostic center is located, including the Youth Rehabilitation Center. And number two is the Camp Bukang Liwayway. Camp Bukang Liwayway is a camp where it houses minimum security prisoners. Okay? Next, in jail, the city and municipal jails are administered by the Bureau of Jail and Management PENOLOGY, whereas the provincial jails are being administered by the provincial government. The prisons, on the other hand, are being administered by the Bureau of Corrections. The BJMP, or the Bureau of Jail Management and Penology, is under the Department of Interior and Local Government. Whereas the Bureau of Corrections, or the BUCOR, is under the Department of Justice. Next is the non-institutional corrections. As I said, non-institutional corrections is a kind of correction, a type of correction, wherein the convicted offender will be serving his sentence in the community. And it is a way of decongesting our prisons and jails, and these are also the alternatives to imprisonment. Examples of non-institutional corrections are probation, pardon, and parole. Okay. What is probation? Probation is a disposition under which a defendant, after conviction and sentence, is released subject to the conditions imposed by the court and supervision of a probation officer. So, probation, once the person is convicted of a crime, he will not be sent into the prison or jail, but he will be sent to the community, but subject to the conditions by the court and supervision of the probation officer. Okay? Take note that the right to file an appeal and the right to apply for probation are exercised in alternative, meaning to say that when a person applies for probation, he can no longer appeal, and if this person appeals, he can no longer apply for probation. Be noted further that not all convicts are qualified for probation because in PD 968 there are disqualifications. Okay? And for example, some of the disqualifications are those persons who are sentenced to serve a prison term or maximum term of imprisonment more than 6 years. And another example is that when a person committed or convicted of any crime against the security of the state, and also when the person been once in probation, because probation is only granted once. So when the court revoked the order, okay, the person can no longer appeal or can no longer apply for another probation. And also, in the new law, in Republic Act 9165, or I mean new provision of probation, specifically under Section 24 of Republic Act 9165, persons convicted of drug trafficking and drug pushing are also disqualified for probation. And also, okay, we stated here that probation, there are conditions to be imposed by the court, and these conditions are mandatory and discretionary conditions. Examples of the mandatory conditions in probation is that the probationer, okay, needs to report to his probation officer, okay, at least once a month, okay. And another is that the probationer, okay, should present himself to the probation officer within 72 hours or equivalent to 3 days from the receipt of the order. Okay? What if the probationer violated the conditions of the probation order? For instance, okay, the probationer violated the condition of the probation, okay, the court may revoke or may modify the conditions of the probation. And if the probation order is revoked, okay, then the probationer is not allowed or cannot appeal the decision of the court. And if found guilty, okay, for violating the conditions of the probation, then the person will be serving, okay, the unexpired portion, or I mean, he will be serving the original sentence imposed to him by the court. Okay? And lastly, is probation officer. He is under the supervision of a probation officer. Probation officer is a person who supervises the probationer. Probationer, on the other hand, is a person who is under probation. Also, probation officer is the person, okay, who conducts post-sentence investigation to be submitted to the court. Okay? It contains here his recommendation whether or not probation will be granted. However, the court has still the final say, okay, whether the probation order or the probation will be granted or not. Okay? In other words, okay, the court may or may not consider the report of the probation officer. What is pardon? Pardon is an executive clemency, okay, granted by the President of the Philippines, Republic of the Philippines, for the Chief Executive, and it is an act of grace proceeding from the power entrusted with the President, which exempts the individual on whom it is bestowed from punishment the law inflicts for a crime he has committed. In pardon, actually, it includes any crime. Okay? Example, murder, rape, infanticide, parricide, and others. But of course, there are limitations, there are exemptions. Okay? There are cases that the president cannot extend pardon. And later on, we will discuss. Okay. Next, we have also kinds of pardon. We have the absolute and conditional pardon. What matters in absolute pardon is that it has no condition attached and it becomes effective the moment it is granted, and there's no need for a person or for the offender to accept it. Conditional pardon, on the other hand, okay, it is actually a kind of pardon that is given with conditions attached. Hence, for it to become effective, the offender should accept all the conditions attached therein. Okay? These are the limitations of the pardoning power of the president. Pardon cannot be extended in cases of impeachment and in common offenses or violation of election laws. Okay? No pardon may be granted without the favorable recommendation of the common. Pardon is exercised only after conviction by final judgment. Okay? And no pardon may be exercised over a civil contempt because the president has no power to pardon a private wrong. Okay? What is amnesty? Okay? Amnesty is an act of oblivion, meaning to say, okay, it is the state of forgetfulness, or it is also a general pardon for a past offense usually granted in favor of certain classes of people who have committed crimes that are political in character, such as treason, sedition, and rebellion. Okay? Let's go with the difference between pardon and amnesty. In pardon, as I said earlier, it includes any crime. Okay? Whereas in amnesty, it is only limited to political crimes such as sedition, rebellion. Okay? In pardon, it is exercised individually. Okay? Whereas in amnesty, it is given to classes of people. In pardon, it is only given when the person is convicted, whereas in amnesty, it may be granted before trial or even during investigation. In pardon, it is granted by the president, whereas in amnesty, it is granted by the president, but with the concurrence of the Congress. And in pardon, courts takes no judicial notice, whereas in amnesty, courts take judicial notice. When we speak of judicial notice, it means a fact that is need not to be proved. Okay. Next is the parole. Parole is the supervision of sentence of a convict after having served the minimum of the sentence, without imposing or granting pardon, prescribing the terms of suspension. So in parole, it is a conditional release also of a person or prisoner after he or she has served the minimum of his sentence. Take note that not all prisoners can be granted parole because there are these persons who cannot be granted by the BPP, for instance, those who have a sentence of maximum term of 1 year or less, or to a straight penalty, and they are sentenced without minimum period of imprisonment. So the one who grants parole is the Board of Pardon and Parole under the Office of the Secretary of Justice. So what if, as I said earlier, parole is also a conditional release. So what happens if a person or a parolee, okay, violated the conditions of the parole. If the parolee, okay, if the parolee violated the conditions of the parole, he will be rearrested and recommitted to prison, and he will be serving the unexpired portion of his maximum imprisonment. Next, we also have the therapeutic community, because in correctional administration, therapeutic modality is one of the subjects in that area. Okay? Under CMO 5 series of 2018. Therapeutic community refers to an environment or treatment environment that there is an interaction between an individual and another people, or it is an environment that helps people get help while helping others. And also, each person is required to play the dual role of client and therapist. So about time, or at a given time, a person may assume the role of a client when he or she is receiving support or help from others, when he or she is in trouble, or maybe when he or she is experiencing stress. And at about time, or at another time, this person can also assume the role of therapist when he or she is giving support to another person when they are in trouble. Okay? Therapeutic Community Program. Therapeutic Community Program is a reformation program that represents an effective, highly structured environment with defined boundaries, both moral and ethical. So Therapeutic Community Program is a kind of reformation program that is being extended to drug dependents and persons with behavioral problems. The aim of this program is to transform the person as a productive, reformed, habilitated, and also drug-free and law-abiding citizen, as if we are restoring the self-confidence and the self-esteem of the person, and we are preparing him, okay, as a good individual when he or she will be returning to the community or to his family members. So that ends my presentation, and I do not forget, okay, this quotation. Act as if what you do makes a difference. It really does. So don't be tired of reading your notes. Don't be tired of studying, because all these sacrifices, all the efforts that you give, you really show a difference. So good luck in your studies, and thank you for your time